Hi, my name is David Reske, CEO of Nowspeed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of Marketing in the Now, where we talk about the best ideas in marketing. And my guest today is Andy Zimmerman, CMO of Tamr, an AI data management company. Andy is the former CEO of AR Insights and also a former CMO at Evergage, Brainshark, among others. Andy, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, David. Glad to be here.
You and I met maybe 10 years ago when I think you were at Evergage, and it's just been amazing to follow your success. You've done so many great things really since then. And I'm fascinated by your background. You had a CEO role and a CMO role. What are the pros and cons of those different positions in
Yeah, so I've come back to the CMO role after a 3-year stint as a CEO, with a different perspective for sure. I think I'm a little bit more enlightened in certain ways, but I'm also, I think, a better marketer in other ways, having had the experience. But yeah, it's been a fun ride. And by the way, I wanted to correct one thing you said. We actually met back when I was at a company called Thecos, which was more companies ago,
back in the day? Wow, long time
way
ago.
back in the day. So you and I go back even longer. So yeah.
That's awesome, man. We've been doing this a long time, Andy. It's great to
Yes.
see you. Great to connect on this. Well, you and I have been talking about a topic that's very important these days, which is running lean as marketing teams are shrinking. What's your perspective on that? Do you feel like that's something most companies are dealing with? Are people always trying to get more done with less? Are you just using fewer people to get things done? Is that a factor of technology? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, boy, lots to cover there. So, I do have that benefit of perspective over time. And I was managing a marketing team with a company of about 60 million, with about 20 people in marketing. And now I think that would be a huge team for a company of that size. Um, and back then I was thinking, back like we use contractors here and there for a couple, things. Sometimes it was short term. Now the norm is really to leverage contractors or specialized people almost as default and only hire if you need to.
Hmm.
So it's sort of like the opposite of what it used to be. But so as a CEO, that company was about let's say 30-ish people. When I started there, actually less than 20, and we leveraged a lot of contractors there. And it was a PE-backed company. So running lean was sort of integral, right? It had to be profitable, steady growth, and using your investment and dollars wisely. So I kind of got into that habit of sort of figuring out how do we maintain a level of profitability for the business overall, without overinvesting in people. So we started using contractors really across the organization, for not just marketing, but engineering. I think one of the only departments was maybe sales that we didn't outsource, but we had contract engineering, contract finance, HR, a number of other roles. So I kind of got into that habit. So when I came into this role in this time, in this era, I was already sort of trained to like think, how do we do this as efficiently as possible, which was definitely an advantage. And what's happened, I've noticed just in the last couple of years, I think it was probably mid 22, tech companies started laying people off. There was, well, maybe there wasn't a recession overall in the economy. There was definitely one in tech. The big companies started, more and more companies were laying off people, and especially hitting marketing. So this idea of trying to do more with less has always been around, but I think it was really concentrated in this period. Then you compound that with AI, and I think ChatGPT kind of came onto the scene obviously years ago, but it was probably 2023 when people were like, "Wow, this is a game changer. How do we use this?" And so that compounded the effect, and you had more layoffs and more layoffs. So now in tech companies in marketing, this notion of hiring back people, people don't have an appetite for that. They want you to run as lean as possible, use as many contract resources, or be as sort of smart as you can with your budget to get as much done as possible with as few sort of dedicated headcount as possible. So I don't know. There's been a number of things that have sort of trained me to be able to operate in this environment. Um, and I think, I'm grateful for that, but it's still a challenge, which I don't know. We can dive further into that, but
Yeah,
that's my that's the background that
we're
I have
gonna,
coming
yeah,
into this
we'll definitely
conversation.
talk more about that. And I hope when you're talking about contractors, you're talking about contractors and agencies at the same time. So, because we'd love to be, we'd love to participate in all of that with these companies. But let's just dig into some of those factors that you're talking about. One is, let's just talk about AI, the impact of AI, because that's on everyone's mind. Does that mean that we're able to do more with less? And does that mean we need just fewer people, or do you see firms letting go of people, or just asked to do more with the people that they've got? Or how do you think about that as a leader?
Well, yeah, so justifying hires is harder. So I sort of made that point. And where you can have people that are versatile and sort of multidisciplinary and able to kind of dabble in different parts of marketing. Marketing is diverse to begin with, but having people that have, I think, maybe the level of sort of perspective, maybe it's seniority, but also just kind of experience and perspective on all the aspects of marketing so that they can better leverage not just part-time resources, but also technology, right? So AI can be an accelerant, it can be an efficiency tool, it can be an idea generator. It can do a lot of things as long as you've got that human oversight. Like there's like no part of marketing that maybe programmatic advertising, but that's been around a long time and that's not generative AI stuff, right? But there's very little that you just sort of let run, right? You need the people to kind of monitor, what you're using the technologies for. So people also not only have to have that versatility, they have to be sort of comfortable with a number of technologies, right? You have to be able to kind of jump into like 8 different systems in a day and know them well enough so that you know how to get the most, the most out of them. But AI is now kind of part of everything. Like it's in all the tools we're using. So maybe we're not consciously saying, oh, we're using AI for that, but if we're using our marketing automation platform, right, or we're using a design platform, there's AI now kind of built into all of these tools, making us more efficient in the tasks we have within each of these tools. So it's interesting, right? Then there's like the Chat GPT or Claude or other things where you are genuinely going in there and prompting it to like write me something or summarize this or generate a draft of a blog post. Like these are all things that definitely make us more productive than we used to be. So for me, it's an accelerant. Like it enables a small team to just do a lot more and a lot more quickly than they could before.
Yeah.
Um,
And I
yeah.
and I definitely agree with that. I mean, as we use it here at Nowspeed, do you think that the capability of AI, especially generative AI, puts a premium on having more senior marketing people
Mm,
because they can be exponentially more effective. So if you're creating some content, in the old days you would assign it to a writer, they would do some research, you come back in a week, they come back and make edits, changes, right? You're getting things done and it takes weeks and maybe days and days or weeks and weeks to get something like that done. Today, an expert can know what's good, change the prompts iteratively and have something done in minutes, right?
yeah.
So, do you think that puts a premium having more senior people who can kind of use a variety of tools, or can you really leverage people up and down the experience
Yeah,
curve,
I don't
in
think
your
so, right? And
organization?
I hesitated before when I said seniority because I think versatility is more important. And I've worked with folks
Mm.
in even a smaller organization that were the first in marketer, and they were much less experienced than others, but got perspective on all the things that marketing needs to do very quickly in their careers. So they gain this perspective, they gain this versatility, even if they don't have that much seniority or tenure. So if you have that, then you have the advantage of having probably more perspective and more versatility, but not necessarily. I think a lot of younger marketers are coming in and gaining that. If they're joining a smaller company, they can get that breadth pretty quickly. And then that sets them up well for any role in marketing, in my opinion, because when you understand the bigger picture, like I said, as a CEO too, I got an even broader picture, so it makes me a better CMO. So the broader you can, the more you can broaden your perspective and your horizons, the better you are at doing whatever you need to do, in any given day, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that. Let's just talk about that word versatility a little bit more because I think that that's a key to what you're talking about in running lean, or so important to be able to run lean. So when you have, and I was talking about experience, right, and maybe industry knowledge. So I can almost think of like constructing this little two by two matrix, right, of experience and industry knowledge on one axis, and then the other
Yeah.
axis being versatility. But that versatility seems like it's so important because you're dealing with different things in marketing all the time. At one point you could be tuning a ad campaign, another you're a time you're thinking about new content for the website as product is shifting, you're working with partners, you're doing trade, there's just so many things to do. So how do you look for people that
Mm.
have show that high aptitude for versatility that can fit into the modern lean marketing organization?
Yeah, good question. So, like I said, people that have maybe worked in smaller organizations and had more responsibility for more parts of marketing actually puts you at an advantage. I think if you come into marketing straight out of college and you have a defined role within, let's say, a very large company and in marketing, maybe it's I'll say a 50-person marketing company and up, those are big. So your role is probably going to be fairly limited. So that doesn't mean you're not a candidate for a smaller company later, but you have to gain that visibility. You have to kind of work up the chain, work with your manager and maybe others to kind of gain that broader perspective on how marketing is operating in its entirety. So honestly, I think it's a little bit harder coming out of a big company to go into a smaller company. If you come into marketing into a smaller company, by design, you're going to get a lot of uh, visibility and a perspective on how that marketing department or the company runs. So you'll be better suited with that versatility. Right now, there's this proliferation of startups again, and AI is fueling that. So I think there are a lot of people now that are coming into marketing in smaller organizations that can gain that perspective to be versatile players wherever they then go. So yeah, I vote for the small company in my mind in that regard.
Yeah, and for
I'm
people
thinking
that
about when you asked me too, I was thinking about the people on my team. I have a very small team. For a company of our size, I would have expected probably, 8 to 10 marketers. We're half that, but we leverage about 10 or 11 people that are contract resources, a couple agencies with different people with different skills. So like we've kind of divided and conquered, but every one of us in this team of basically four that are dedicated have to manage a lot of different tools and people and processes and fun. Like so, we're all versatile. In and how do we all get that way in different way? Like uh, in one case, it's well, actually, in all cases, I think it's probably a combination of experience and experience at small companies.
yep.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So let's talk about contractors and agencies, right? So as a core component, because you're saying that the work still needs to get done. You don't have all the core skill sets on any marketing team. You need to leverage contractors and agencies. Those resources often come at a higher hourly rate than employees. Is it ultimately cheaper? Is it more efficient to be doing it this way, or is it just more flexible? In your
Mm.
opinion, and maybe both.
I think it is both. I don't think they're necessarily more expensive because they are more efficient, right? So even at a higher rate, if they really know what they're doing in the function you need them to do, then that's actually cheaper than having someone who's not really an expert that's kind of going to fumble through it, right? And
Right.
it won't be as effective, right? So there's also that element too, is you want the like I'll take, Google Ads, take search marketing for an example. We have a consultant that does that for many different clients, and he's very focused on that. He can perform at a much more efficient level than anyone on the team, and keep up with what's changing with the algorithms and optimization and things like that. So that's a perfect example in my mind of sort of when to outsource, but also the importance of governance. Like so, this same individual I don't think was doing such a great job a year ago. And it wasn't really his fault, because he didn't have the sort of proper guidance and oversight from the organization until we got into a pattern of like, all right, let's have a regular cadence of communications and let's analyze the changes that are being made and let's get feedback, like what's happening downstream with the leads that get generated, and are we on message with those, like this sort of iteration, which is really important to make him as good as possible in this function. So again, it comes back to like, you can't hand it off and let them run with it independently and expect great results. There has to be this sort of partnership with versatile players on the team in the company.
And there has to be that with employees, right? As your internal team. But I think what you're saying is that when you have an external team, and maybe in the virtual world it doesn't matter that much, but you don't necessarily run into those folks at the water cooler or down the hall. You have to plan structured
That's true.
ways to work with contractors, systems and process that get the most out of those people and make them
Yeah.
feel, and yet so that they feel like they're part of the whole team.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, but because like in the post-COVID era, we've gotten more used to working virtually and more people working from home and now hiring people on the team in-house that can live anywhere. Like I think we're better at working with contractors than we used to be because we're working with each other internally, remotely better than we used to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do the contractors and agencies that you work with feel like they're just part of the team? Or do you feel like, hey, I've got my contractors and I've got my employees? Like,
I
are
think
they all
it,
kind of doing similar, not similar things, but they're all doing parts of what you need to get done?
yeah.
You kind of
I
put
mean,
them in two different buckets, or do you kind of think of them as one integrated team?
no. Different people just doing different things to different degrees. Um, and I'll draw on sort of my experience previously at the last company I was with, where I mentioned we used a lot of contractors as well. And some of those folks would come to the company meeting. Like we do a company meeting every other week. Some would come, some would not. And it was always sort of like, well, it depends what you do and whether that is an important investment of your time, right? And if we're paying you, the company's time. Like, so I think it's an it depends situation. If someone really has a very specific function and they can operate fairly independently and they don't need that broader context of team meetings or company meetings, then they're still part of the team, but they're part of the extended team. But there are other contractors and maybe agency team members that would be more integral, and they're going to come to every team or company meeting, and they feel more part of the team. But whether they're being paid, whether they're getting a W-2 or a 1099, that kind of doesn't really matter.
Yeah. It sounds
Yeah.
like what matters is whether or not you get invited to the company meeting.
Well, yeah, I guess it's sort of like that says, you're more integral.
Yeah.
But most people kind of know when they are and they aren't too.
Right.
Some people
Yeah.
be like, why am I here? I don't need to be here.
Right. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes perfect sense. So this is definitely a trend. We're seeing this especially in tech, with marketing lean teams. What are the downsides to this? And maybe you could speak to it from your CEO perspective when you had that role, and maybe from the CMO perspective. Are there any downsides to this, and how do you manage around that?
Well, one of the downsides is burnout. Maybe that's an obvious one, but you talk about people being versatile and navigating, across many different functions or projects and jumping around, and it can be taxing. It can be stressful. You have to be sort of built for it, and if you are, you know, not inclined to have that broad or that kind of diverse set of responsibilities, then that from some soul searching, you might say, I'm better equipped to be a contractor because I really like doing this thing. Like I'm really good at, paid social, or I'm really good at PR or whatever it may be. Then that sort of should say, well, then I want to do this I want to focus here. Now, maybe it's multiple clients and there's still a juggling act, but that's an important thing to know about yourself. And these days, if you get excited and sort of invigorated by the diversity of things and things that might change from day to day and jumping from one thing to the next, well, then this is for you. But I think some people have tried to make that transition and realize they're getting burnt out because they're really not suited for the way that things operate now. And I don't see that changing. Like I see it sort of being in a permanent state now, at least for in tech B2B marketing. I can speak most of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of other downsides. Maybe what we talked about a little bit with being alienated. Like if you're a contractor, are you on the inside or not quite on the inside? I mean, maybe you feel a little bit on the outside. But that's sort of a decision you make when you're a contractor too, is like, if I wanted to own it and be responsible, like I should join a company full time versus consult or advise, you know, you're by design going to be perhaps on the outside.
Yeah.
Um,
The
so
cool thing is that it opens up opportunities for marketers in all those areas, right? So you could be part of an agency like Nowspeed, and we manage a lot of the business development and the client relationships and all that. And you get to do your thing. You could be an independent contractor working independently, or you could be inside in a company, and then you get to go to the company meetings. That's
yeah,
nice. But you're part of that family. There's a little more, maybe a little more commitment, a little more stability, but you have you have to be versatile, right? You're
yeah,
working across a lot of different things. So it strikes me that it does open up a lot of opportunities for people who want to do different things, with their
right,
lifestyle, with their job.
exactly.
Yeah. So, can you ever see a world, and I think you started to answer this, but where this pendulum swings the other way, where companies, especially in your experience with B2B tech companies, start to load up again on people and just and bring everything internal and kind of stop running as lean and really build up their own staffs.
No. I don't think we're turning the clock back.
Yeah.
There's always been pressure on marketing to run lean, and it's only become more pronounced, and CFOs and CEOs kind of like the numbers, less committed headcount. Um, we have figured out in the last few years how to continue to operate at you know maybe growth hasn't been there for all companies, but for many companies, right, we've still been able to execute pretty effectively. And so now the bar is just at a different level, right? So now, percent of revenue or whatever metric you want to use for investment is now at a new level. In my opinion, I've heard other people say it's really not changed. There's maybe a shift toward spending more on tech or more on outsourced resources. But overall, I think the percent of spend on marketing, all things being equal, has dropped. Um, and we got to operate that way going forward. Maybe in boom times it might relax that a little bit, but CFOs always like to see, really good margins. That'll never change. And as long as marketing can be squeezed, and marketing will be squeezed.
Yeah. And be as efficient as possible. I mean,
Yeah,
that's the nature of business, right?
yeah,
So, what's your view of the role of tech? So we talked a little bit about AI, but there's so much marketing tech out there, right? So there's probably a temptation to load up on marketing automation platforms, the new video technology, or there's AI, there's all of this tech. So
yeah.
are marketing budgets getting squeezed on the tech side too, in the tech stack, or is the tech stack a new permanent cost that companies have learned to absorb, and it's
Yeah,
fine
I
because
mean,
we're
it's
getting
never
super
been.
productivity out of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few like core platforms that can take a bigger chunk out of the budget, like marketing automation. Um, but for the most part, like there's been a steady percent allocation, excuse me, percent of allocation for tech. And I think the tech is getting better. There's more alternatives, and so I don't see the percent of say marketing spend rising dramatically. I think there's this shift towards maybe more AI focused solutions, certainly additional solutions, and a lot of them are low cost. We're talking like a lot of like put them on your credit card type tools that are really valuable. So there's this juggling act, like with the people that are doing the roles. Can they juggle that many different tools and log in that many different systems and know what they're doing, and are they getting the most out of those tools? So I'm a sort of a little bit concerned about that proliferation of too many things, diluting really the effectiveness of the investment in tech generally. But that being said, I just think the tech keeps getting better, and we'll continue to kind of cycle through different things or find alternatives or get improvements on what we're using for tech, but not so much supplanting the spend in other places. Like let's say it's, 10%. I'm not sure what the number is, but let's say if it's 10%, I don't see that percentage changing dramatically. Just the technologies we use will continue to change and get better.
Yeah. So you've just got to really manage it well
Yeah.
as a CMO. You've got to make sure you're getting the most out of that.
Yeah.
Andy, we've just got a few minutes left. I just want to ask you to think about CMO who's kind of in a growing company, maybe a growing tech company, and they're really building their team, and they've got to think about choices about, hiring versus contractors versus software versus, what advice would you give them as they're trying to navigate their priorities over the next couple of years? They're trying to grow their
Yeah.
staff and grow their capabilities.
Well, in my opinion, it really starts with an assessment of what you're working with. So I've stepped into different roles in different organizations, and the first thing I do is sort of observe, ask a lot of questions, take some notes, and before making changes, it's more about like, well, what are we working with, right? And like at Tamr, I've been very fortunate to step in a situation where it was a very small team, but really talented. And based on the talents of the team, that sort of dictates how much we go in the way of contractors or tech, and how do we supplement, how do we get the most out of the team that we have. Luckily, I didn't have a situation where I was like, oh, this person just doesn't fit. Or, sometimes that coming in, and the CEO whispers in your ear, like, oh, you're getting a great team, but I don't know about so and so. Like, luckily that wasn't the case here, but I've been in other situations where it is, and you might have to move someone into a different role or move them on from the organization. But more, it's really about like, let's see what we have, what fits, where do we have the gaps? Do we need to hire? Or if we're getting pressure to not hire, well, how do we do it? Like, we can't ignore certain parts of marketing. So how do we get it done as efficiently as we can? Who can manage those resources? So anyway, long answer is assess the talent, in the organization first, and then kind of fill in with the rest.
Yeah, assess the talent maybe against the objectives and what you've got to accomplish, and then
Absolutely.
figure out where you can invest in people and in tools to help you really get where you got to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's a brave new world, right? Well, lean, efficient, effective, lots of
Yeah,
technology. I mean, think about where this was 20 years ago, right? With the
different
number of
world.
people, it's like different strategies and different technologies. It's
Yeah.
been a lot of change. Andy, you're a survivor, as I am, and we've seen a lot. So thank you for having this conversation, Andy. I really appreciate it. If people want to connect with you and learn more about you or continue this conversation, what's the best way for them to engage with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn, Andy Zimmerman, Tamr.com. You can learn about Tamr, and happy to connect and answer people's questions, and yeah, spread the goodwill.
Great. Thanks for joining today.
You bet. Thank you. Appreciate you having me.